We're excited you're able to join us today. I am Bob Miller, Manager of Color Services, and I also manage the Experience Center, part of which you can see behind me. So the Experience Center here in Rolling Meadows, just 10 minutes from O'Hare Airport. We have everything that you need for the perfect print here. We have products from multiple manufacturers, but behind me, you will notice our HP wall. I actually, here in our showroom on the HP side, we have the R series that you can see. Behind that, we have a 365. Over to my left that you can't see is 800W. That's one of the new printers with white ink that, you know, we're gonna talk about white today. So it works out really, really well. And then of course we have a die sub printer by HP, which is the Stitch 500. So if there's ever anything that you need to see or any questions that you have, just know that we're always here. So I think everybody is in. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Today, we are joined by Lee Manovich. He is the solutions architect for HP. And we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to lay out your file so that you can print white ink correctly. So, and we'll talk a little bit about ONYX. Maybe if you have questions about Caldera, we can just talk briefly about that or whatever, but this is primarily going to be an Illustrator technique that you're going to use that will help your RIP identify the layers for output. So before I get started, I just want to mention that everybody here is in listen only mode, and during actually the presentation, we will be monitoring your questions. We want to make this interactive. So if you do have questions along the way, please shoot them through the Q&A section of your Zoom, and we'll be monitoring that. So, so please let us know what questions you have. So at this point, let me turn it over and spotlight Lee Manovich. So Lee, over to you.
All right, thanks, Bob, and hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Lee Manovich. I am a solutions architect out of Boise, Idaho. Solutions architect is a really fancy term for somebody who works with the application side of our printers. So, you know, not IT, not the mechanics necessarily, but how to actually make them work. I come from industry. I'm fairly new to HP. I think Saturday is my 4-year anniversary. So before then, I've been in commercial print for well, almost 30 years now. And of that 30 years, almost 30 has been spent actually with Adobe Illustrator. So I've got a fair amount of experience there. So let me move my screens around a little bit so that I can share my Illustrator screen. And like Bob said, please, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I want this to be interactive, and how did I do that? I want this to be as interactive as possible, and I also definitely want to. I want to not have Zoom crash on me. Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
Are we back? Okay.
You're live. You're good.
I tried to move the control window so it wasn't in the way of all of my Illustrator panels, and all of a sudden I just got the little spinny cursor. But yeah, I want to make this interactive. You know, we're talking about technique here, so if there's something that I'm doing that you have a question about, by all means ask it right then and there. Don't wait to the end, because then, you know, we'd have to kind of back up and figure out where everything is. So I have a variety of files here just so I can show you kind of some typical and maybe some atypical files that you might get. And some of these are a little bit fun. So the first one I have here is this is all vector artwork. If I go into my wireframe mode, we can see that it's all vectors, but there are just a couple of gotchas here, and the gotchas that I'll talk about, one is, where are you? Yeah, that M has a stroke applied to it, and I'll show you why that becomes a problem later. And then also I have this little hole in the B, which it should remain clear. I don't necessarily want white ink there. But so this is kind of my formula for a file like this, which is all vector. This is the way I generally handle this. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my layers palette, and mercifully, everything is already on one layer for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that layer, and I'll come up over here to this little 3-line icon, and I'm going to duplicate that layer. So it's going to make an exact copy. It's better to do it this way than to copy and paste, just because copy and paste will actually paste it centered on the screen, not necessarily in exactly the same place as it was before. This puts everything exactly. It is just a duplicate. Now that I've done that, I can turn my original layer off. And the first thing I'm going to do, just because right now, especially with my palette not fully expanded, they're the same name. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I'll just call this, doesn't really matter what I call it, but just to keep it straight in my head, I'm going to now call this white artwork. Okay. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything in this layer. And if you've never discovered this before in Illustrator, you're really in for a treat. If I click on this button right here, it selects everything on a layer. So now I have everything selected. And yeah, I just want to make sure. Oh yeah, it's not the M, it's this little jagged line that's going around. That's the one that has the stroke. So I'll show you why this matters in a moment. So if I come over here to my color, notice that I have, this is my stroke right now, just the outline of things. And notice that it has a question mark, which means I have multiple colors or appearances. And if I click on this so that that becomes the foreground, that's my fill. And that also has multiple colors. So let's work first with fill, and I'll show you why that jagged edge becomes a problem. I don't really care what I'm going to fill it with. I just want to fill it with a solid color right now. See this? I still have a black line, okay? So it's not necessarily the end of the world, but I'd have to go back in, just select that black line, because if I go to my stroke now and change that, watch what happens to like here and around my curves and everything else. If I just make it the same color, right? It's going to make it a little bit bigger. And I don't necessarily want that. So let me back this up and show you the way I do this, because the other thing I don't want is to have all of these shapes. So what I'm going to do is, and I'll show you, let's assume you don't have it on your palette here, is go to Window, and I am going to choose Pathfinder. Pathfinder is this really cool tool that Illustrator has where I can combine multiple shapes into a single shape. Does a variety of things, but the one that I want to use is this one right here, which is Unite. So it's going to take all of these paths, and I've got dozens of them, and it's going to turn it into one single shape. Okay. Look at that. So now I have just my one single shape. Okay. Now, if I undo, notice though what happened to my black. Watch really closely right here when I unite. My stroke disappeared. Okay. That's another problem. So before I go to Pathfinder, I'm actually going to come over here first to Object, and then where is my Simplify? You know, this worked fine in my head. Let's do Expand. Expand rather, not Simplify. I'm in the wrong program. So expand, and I'm going to expand fill and expand stroke. And once I do that, you'll notice that now this becomes a shape. with edges and points and everything else. Okay. Now that I've done that, I come back over here, I unite, and now I have my one single shape. If I click away, if I click this, I drag it around, right? It's one single shape, right? Perfect, perfect. Now what I can do is I can go back to my fill, and I can choose any color that I want. It really doesn't matter what visibly the color I'm going to choose is. Generally, I'm going to choose a color that just really, really contrasts with everything else in my file. So there wasn't a lot of green. I'll make something really bright, obnoxious green. Okay. And now the very next step, and this is really the key point that I need to do, I need to go over to my swatches palette. If you don't have it, it's under Window and Swatches. And then down here at the bottom, while I have the fill in the forefront, so not my stroke, but my fill, see how it's coming over, I come over here to this new swatch button. And here's what I need to do. I need to call it Spot 1, just like you see there. So capital S, no space between spot and 1. And my color type, I need to set it to a spot color. Spot color, just like a Pantone color, it's a special named color, and ONYX sees a spot color called Spot 1 and says, ah, that's the image data that I need in order to make something white. So I choose Spot 1, I make it a spot color, and there it is. I can double check that it's filled with Spot 1. If I go back over here, I can see that it's Spot 1, right? So that tells me that it is, in fact, Spot 1. Now, there's one extra step that we need to do, okay? Because if I turn, here's my color artwork, here's my white artwork on top of it, okay? Let me switch over here really quickly and show you one other thing. And this comes all the way back to the early days of commercial print. I have two shapes here. I have a cyan circle and I have a magenta circle. And I'll show you, this is a tool that hardly anyone ever even knows about, but if I go to my separations preview, if I just want to show, if I want to see what's going to happen with just my cyan or just my magenta, I can actually go there. And if I turn off my yellow and my black, okay, this is what I have designed, but watch what happens if I turn my magenta off. What you're going to see is all of the cyan that's going to print. And notice that there's a bite taken out of that cyan. Okay, it's what we call knocking out the cyan. Ordinarily, that's great, because if I've designed this on screen, that's what I want it to look like when it prints. But if I want those two colors to mix together so that in the middle here, I have a combination of magenta and cyan, right, a blue, there's an extra step that I need to do with the magenta, okay? And the way I'm going to do that is if I come over here to Window and Attributes, I select my magenta, and right over here, Overprint Fill. So what Overprint Fill is going to do is it's telling the software not only print the magenta, but also print whatever is underneath it. And now when I choose Overprint Fill, now I get the mixture of the two colors together. So now that we've seen that, let's go back over to this file and watch what happens if I go to my separations preview, which I can't do until I change this to CMYK. Sorry about that. All right, we're a CMYK file now. Everything dulled up because CMYK. I'm going to go to my overprint preview so that I can turn this stuff on. Watch what happens when I turn off Spot 1. This is just visual, so this shows you the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black that'll print underneath it. It's gone, it's missing, okay? Because right now, Spot 1, right, this green is not set up to overprint. So I click on my Spot 1, I go to my attributes, I turn on Overprint Fill, and now my image data prints along with the white. Okay, it's really important. So there's a couple of steps that we need to do we need to call it spot 1. It needs to be a spot color. It always needs to be on top of my color artwork, and that doesn't matter what my print mode is, whether it's white underneath, whether it's white on top, whether it's sandwich mode or anything. The white always in your art file has to be on top. It's generally just way easier to overprint my solid white shape that I have than it is to start messing around with, this needs to overprint my white, but it can't overprint this other color and everything else. It's just easier to work with the one color. Okay, so put white on top and make sure that overprint fill is on. And you can always double check it right over here in the view. I can turn on or off overprint preview. Watch what happens when I turn it off. I just get my solid white on top. But if I turn my overprint preview back on, now I can see it. And by the way, for this, you don't have to be in CMYK mode for overprint preview. All right. It's just that one separations palette, which for instructional purposes is much easier to show you doing that. Okay. So those are the steps that I need to take. And oh, the other thing that I should point out is I'm a PDF person. I like to save my files in PDF out of Illustrator. If you do that and you have, let's say, color artwork layer is turned off, ONYX will not print that layer. So make sure before you save your file and go through the process of actually opening it in ONYX and everything, make sure that your layer is turned on before you save it. Yeah, I've been burned by that. And it's never on a small file that's easy to open and rip. It's always on a massive file that takes ages to save and open.
Now,
but so,
Lee,
go ahead.
you use PDFX for that, right?
I don't actually.
Okay.
So here is because there's no need for me to use that standard to do PDFX, and so as I go through here, so let me show you. Oh, let me boom vector. Oh, with white.pdf. And I'll show you, and I have a preset that's already set up for myself to do this, but I don't use a standard. For me, there's no reason to pigeonhole it to a standard. So the key things that I do, my compatibility, I always choose the highest or the most recent compatibility, I guess I should say, because as I go up this list, there are features of Illustrator that can disappear from your PDF as you work this direction. Okay, yep. Gradients on spot colors and things like that. As I work toward the top, all of a sudden there's things that I can do in Illustrator that won't save. So I definitely turn those off.
Okay.
I preserve my Illustrator editing capabilities, so it's going to save not only a PDF, but it also saves the Illustrator file in the PDF, which is what allows me to just open a PDF file in Illustrator without any issue. I keep all my layers and everything. I don't embed page thumbnails because I just don't see the value in there. I do create Acrobat layers from top level layers. That allows me, if I open this file, this PDF in Acrobat, that allows me to turn the white layer on and off so that I can see what's going on.
Okay.
And then the other really important one is under output. This is the way I like to have it set up. I'm not doing any color conversion. I don't want, just by virtue of saving the file, I don't want any changes made to my color. So I choose no conversion here, which if you do PDFX, it will convert. So I do no conversion, and then profile inclusion policy, I choose include all profiles. That actually embeds the ICC profile that I was using when I created this file into the artwork. And I like that because ONYX's default behavior is to use an embedded profile if there is one in your file. So even if my color settings are different between Illustrator or Photoshop and ONYX, if I'm embedding those profiles, ONYX will use the way it's set up here rather than the way it thinks it might be set up. That's really a nice feature. So I definitely do that. It adds a little bit of overhead to your file size, but it can keep you from getting some color surprises down the road.
Yeah, and you and I will differ on that because I am a big fan, and having met with Adobe and stuff, of the PDF X4 and the new PDFX that's due out. Those two, version 4 and the one that is to come next, those are the standards that they recommend for incorporating all of the aspects of your file into, you know, your output. So embedding everything, including your profiles that you designed with and everything, into there. So I do normally, from a color perspective, recommend the PDFX because you just know you're going to bring everything over.
Yeah, the other aspect, Bob, is when I choose PDFX, notice that Preserve Illustrator editing capabilities is not available. So if I do use that workflow, then I need to make sure that I'm diligent about not only having the PDF for print, but I need to keep that AI file as well.
Yes, it is your final output file to the printer. So yes, when you do that. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So and then your output intent and stuff. But okay, well, that's great. I mean, I just wanted to touch on that. I think a lot of people have confusion, especially, you know, it's important to know how to lay out the white, but you also want to make sure that it goes over correctly so that ONYX or Caldera can import it. And I agree, PDF is the best way to ensure that everything is going to carry over. So yeah.
Sure. All right, let me switch gears here and go over to this image. So what if I want to print a black and white photo on black vinyl, or maybe clear vinyl to apply to something black, using white ink only, which, by the way, looks absolutely spectacular. Not only do I think we have the best white in the industry, but man, when it comes to smoothness of tone and things like that, it's just, there really is no comparison. But here's the issue, okay? Just, you know, this is going to be a series of gotchas for you. The way I would ordinarily print this is to colorize it with my spot 1. The problem with that is that everywhere I see solid black will print solid white, and everywhere that I see solid white will print with no white ink. So it's flipped. So what I need to do before I work with this file in Illustrator, and there are times where I would want to do this in Illustrator rather than Photoshop, you know, if this were part of a bigger piece or anything like that. But so the key is I need to invert the file first in Photoshop or whatever your favorite photo editing program is, okay? So once I invert the file, what we're looking at is that this area on his nose, right, and under the eyes is going to print solid white. And like in the highlights of the ears, that's not going to print white at all. It's going to be dark, okay? You know, here's it's going to print dark. This is going to print white. So it looks weird, but that's the way we have to set this up. Now, this particular file, if I look up here in the upper left, I can see that it is a grayscale image. This, what I'm going to show you now, only works with grayscale or bitmap image. Bitmap meaning just black or white. You know, not in the non-traditional sense of just a raster image. If there's any color information, this won't work. But because it's grayscale, I can do exactly the same thing as I did on the last one. I can set up, oh man, that hurts. I can set up a color, okay? I can set up whatever color I would like in here. And once I've done that, I've colorized this. Now I can do the same thing. I can go to my swatches palette. I can create a new swatch, and I can call it spot 1 and make it a spot color. If I go back over here, I can see that this is now colored with spot 1. Okay, so this now is ready to print with white ink only. So let me save this file, because the next steps are going to be to actually rip these, lion with white, and I'll do it my way instead of Bob's way because I'm stubborn.
No problem. I do have another question for you when you're ready,
Okay.
but I'll let you finish this.
Soon as my screen comes back, but yeah, okay. What's the question?
All right, so we are getting asked, does the white need to be choked under the 4 colors or will it fit exactly?
So, so the answer to the second question is no, it will not fit exactly. So on our latex printers that print white, the size of our white drop is slightly larger than the size of our color drops. That said, I do not have to choke my artwork here in Illustrator. I'm going to do it. In the case of the 700 and 800 whites, I can do it at the rip. And in the case of the R series, I would actually do that on the machine. Functionally, it's the same. It's just where you're doing it. So I'll show you, because I don't have an R series interface to show you. I'll show you where it is on the rip for the 700, 800. You know, if the R series is in your future, it's the same product. It's just built into the interface on the printer itself, rather than in the rip. And I'll show you where that is. Doesn't make sense with this file, but obviously with the other one, that boom one, that is going to become important. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's open those files and rip them, and I'll show you how we actually handle this. And boy, it dumped me all the way out. Ay, ay, ay. Now you get to see my horrible, horrible, horrible file structure. All right, so we have boom vector with white, we have lion with white, and I'm going to bring over one other file. And the file that I'm going to bring over is going to be just a color image with no white in it at all, because while I'm in ONYX, let me show you how to add white within ONYX. Okay, I'm going to open these in Job Editor just so that we can, you know, save a little bit of time. And now we wait. Let me pop open Job Editor while we're waiting. When you publish this, Bob, you just splice this together, right?
Yeah, we can definitely speed this up a little bit. So
Here we come. All right, there's a UV woman, but let's start with where we began the day, which is my boom. Remember that Illustrator always brings in, or ONYX rather, apologies, always brings in images as low res. So if I want to get a better idea of what that's going to look like without being so jagged, if I just hit the apply button on the first screen, it'll process it for whatever screen I'm on at the moment. This is a very attractive laptop, but it does not have a lot of horsepower. Okay, so there we go. And if you look down here at the bottom of the screen, as I hover my mouse and just kind of move it around, you can see the CMYK and S1, which is spot one, which is white, build out. You see that all throughout here, anywhere I have my green, you can see that I have 100% spot one, and my CMYK build is changing. And if I go right into this hole here, you see it's 0, 0, 0, which is what I want. So at this point, what I would really need to do is choose my print mode. And why am I not? I don't have white modes on my RIP right now. There we go. Okay, now I have white modes. All right, so if I want to do this, let's say I want to print this as a second surface sign. So if we think about a second surface sign, I want to print my color, then I want to print my white on top because it's going to be applied on the non-viewing side. So that would be color, then white on top. So that mode would be overflood. So I would choose this mode right here, which is, that stands for white overflood with, in this case, 100% ink, white ink density. And I can hit apply if I so choose. And then the only other thing that probably I will want to do if I'm printing this as a second surface sign, this is just one of those things that always burns you till it comes off the printer and you say, oh no, did I really do that? Is to mirror your image. So I will mirror my image because the direction that we're looking at it right now is not the direction that we will be looking at it once it's applied.
Lee, I want you to finish up with this, but before you actually hit print at the end of this, I just want to interject a little tip here along the way, but I want you to finish up what you're doing here, and when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, so I want to go over to my print, and if I go to print setup, and no, that's not where it is. You doofus. It's under. Oh, great! Now I get the spinny pinwheel again. Bob, where's my choke options? Thought it was under print setup. Oh, edit printer settings.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so yeah, so it is under print setup, and then I go to edit printer settings. So here we have two items. One is optimized for lamination. So what that will do is send the job with my overcoat turned off. Overcoat is that scratch resistant liquid that we put down on top of our print. It used to be incorporated directly into our pigmented inks with previous generations of latex printers. Now we've separated it out as a separate liquid so that we have more control over it. We can put a little, we can put a lot, or if we're going to laminate, we can put none at all because I don't need scratch resistant stuff down on my material if I'm going to be covering it with a laminate. And that'll not only save me a couple of pennies a square foot on consumables, but it'll also help get potentially help get a better bond between laminate and film. So that's what optimized for lamination does. But here's the item right here, white choke control. It is 3 pixels. I really don't, and I am going on record as an HP person, I hate that we use this as a unit because this means different things in different print modes. You know, if I'm printing 600 by 1200 DPI, it's different than if I'm printing 1200 by 1200 DPI or in a lower res mode. In general, 3 pixels is a good starting point, and that will automatically, at the printer, it will bring my white in by 3 pixels, right? Which is kind of drops of ink, but not really. But it'll bring it in 3 pixels so that it'll just be hiding just a little bit behind so that you don't get the situation where you have white peeking out from the edge of color. And that's what choke is all about, is just bringing it in just a touch. 3 pixels is a really good starting point. It depends. There's a lot of variables that go into it. So my recommendation for people is always try a small test print. If it's a new media or a new print mode that you're trying, try a small test print before committing to something really big. But that usually is a good starting point.
Yep.
But that's where my choke is. I knew it was there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so before
All right.
I hit print, what do you have for me, Bob?
Okay, so I don't want to derail, but I want to include, so you were perfect in that you named the spot color something that could be recognized here. So just real quick, if you're importing a file that somebody else created or the spot color was not named correctly, can you click on the I at the top of your screen? So
Yep.
right there.
Yep.
Right here, go to named colors, and you can see exactly what that named color was. So if it was named white or something, you can actually see here what it's called. The other thing is that for your spot colors, that for people who don't know, if you're identifying Pantones in here and stuff, it'll actually tell you that the delta E, or how far off you are going to be from the color when you print, based on the profile that's already attached to this media. So this is a really critical area that you need to know about just to check. But let's just say that this named color was white, for example. Can you click OK for me?
Yep.
If that happens, you don't have to go back to the file, but if you go back to the printer and media area over there, let's just do this real quick. This is just a quick example.
Yep.
So you're going to click on Change Profiles. I know you know how to do this, but we're going to go to Output. And we're going to go to Spot Color Replacement. And this is the location. So if it wasn't named Spot 1, you would go down to where it says None, and you would type in the word white or whatever the name is. And then it will automatically recognize that as the white spot color. So whatever that needs to be named. So
and in fact, if you want to, if you do, oh, I can't do that, can I? I thought I could. I thought I could make multiple spot 1, so that you have different names.
Nope, no, just the one. But I just wanted to, I don't want to derail. I want to go back now to what you were doing. So you can delete those, cancel out. So
yeah, that's useful, because nobody ever names them right.
I quite often get files named incorrectly. So that's a quick way to go about changing that.
Yeah.
Yep. And so now we can go on.
Yep. So I have my file all set up. I have my white in there. I have my mode set up. I have my choke applied. So at that point, the only thing I need to do is submit my job, and it is ripping as we speak. All right. So we'll wait for that to do its thing. We'll go back over here, and so here's my lion. And I intentionally chose a different color, because remember, this is the color that I had chosen in my artwork for what my white ink was going to be, my spot 1. Notice as I go to Job Editor that it automatically made it green. That's because ONYX's default behavior is to preview spot 1 in green. Okay, so one of the other things, and I didn't mention this when I was an illustrator, one of the other really quick diagnostics that you can choose if you're an ONYX is choose a non-green color for your white, and instantly you're going to get visual feedback. If this had shown up pink or peach, I would have known instantly that there was a problem with the way I created my file, and so it wasn't automatically substituting spot 1, my white ink, in my file. Now I can verify that's the case. Again, down here, if I hover around here, you see that my CMYK is 0 no matter where I go, and I have S1, right, spot 1, my white ink, all set to go. Okay, so just something to keep in mind, that usually I'm going to avoid green unless it is like the only color that I can actually get away with in my file. That, you know, if I have something that's really super colorful, and green seems to be the color to make the most sense in my Illustrator document, then I'll use green. But otherwise, I tend to shy away from green. That's why I chose the both of those. So let's go back over here. Generic cast. And now this one I'm printing with white only, right? As we see here, this is nothing but white. And so one of the things that I can do in this case is keep in mind that the 700 white, the 800 white, and the R series both have 2 white heads that are staggered from each other. If I choose as my color mode a spot mode, which is going to be WSP in the name in the case of the 700 and 800, if I choose that, now instead of using only one white print head, which is what happens when I'm choosing underflood or overflood, now I'm using both. So my throughput is vastly, vastly improved. Let me hit apply just so I don't have to look at this low res lion. My throughput is vastly improved. Now, the one thing that you need to keep in mind if I'm printing spot mode will print color and white as long as they don't overlap. The moment I print color and white overlapping, I have to choose a mode that's not spot. And the reason for that is because if I choose overflood, underflood, sandwich mode, we've actually done things inside the printer to make sure that those inks don't mix together. In the case of spot, the assumption is that my artwork is not going to have overlapping color and white. And if I do, the color and white will mix together. And so I get kind of a pastel-y, washed out, whitewashed look to my image. In this case, because I'm only printing white ink, I can safely know that I can print in spot mode only. Now, because there's white only, even if I have a choke set up, this is not going to choke this file. Our choke, I should mention this, our choke is what we refer to as a smart choke. So in the case, well, I have it off my screen, but come on, open up. All right, well, I'll do it small. In the case of this boom artwork, there we go. If I also had something over here that was just white without any color, and I had something over here that was color and no white, it would not choke either of those. It only chokes where color and white overlap. Even if I have like a box that's just white that sticks out beyond, it would not choke this section of the box. It would only choke what's inside where there's color overlapping. It's pretty clever. And that is one of the reasons that although you can choke artwork in Illustrator or other products, I actually prefer to do it through the rip, because that smart choke is generally yields better results, especially if I have like fine white type over here in the corner and I choke it, now my fine type just got a lot finer. Which probably is not what I was looking for. Right. But even though I don't have to worry about my choke settings on this because I'm not having any need for choke. So I have my spot, I have my cast self-adhesive vinyl. So I'm ready to go. I could just submit that job and now it's sent to the rip and processing. All right, last image here. And first thing I'm going to do is, again, hit apply so it's higher res. I'm working on a very large screen, so having things all pixelated is really pixelated on my screen. All right, come on now. Boy, oh boy. There we go. Okay. So last item here, if you look down at the bottom, there is no S1. There is no spot one anywhere in this file. Okay, it's not there. So in this case, what if I want to see my spot one. All right. If I want to actually add white inside ONYX, because in this case, you know, let's say this wasn't here and it was just a JPEG or whatever that I was bringing in. I don't necessarily need to open design software just to add white to something. I can do that right at the rip. So let me first change this to cast, and we'll do this as, I don't know, we'll do this as an underflood, I guess. So there's my white underflood mode. So now let's add white. And the way we're going to add white is over in the color correction tab. And then we're going to go to tools. And we're going to go to the spot layer tool. I will warn you that everything, all of these are really, really dangerous, because all of the changes that you make to color inside ONYX are not recorded anywhere. So if I make color adjustments here and then 6 months from now, customer sends me more artwork that has to be reprinted, I had better have taken really good notes on what changes I made here, or I'm not going to get prints that match. So I typically avoid these a lot. All right. There are strategies for working with that, with filters and things, but in general, I tend to avoid those. But this spot layer tool is just lovely, because now that I have that selected, now I have enable spot layer generation. And now that I have, oh yeah, it has to regenerate the preview because I changed the mode. But once I've done that, we'll see it come in. And there's a question in the chat. So if I'm running multiple images with white, will it print white first and then come back to the color over the top, or how does that work? So the way it works, just so you're aware, is that everything is one shot through the machine. Okay, at no point does it back up in order to print more stuff. So the way physically it works, so in this case, I'm printing this as an underflood. I think that's how I have it set up, as an underflood, which means white, then color on top. Is as it progresses through the printer, it's going to lay down white, and then later on, it's going to lay down color on top of the white, right? So I've got depth, I've got staggered heads, and so it's going to print white at the beginning, and then as my media advances in the print zone, it's going to print color on top of that. So it's one shot through the machine. There's no worry about, as an example, registration between white and color, because I've printed, you know, let's say 100 linear feet, then I've backed up 100 linear feet. That's not how that works at all. It's just one shot through the machine. And that's all of our white modes, which for the 700, 800, so we have underflood, which is white underneath color. And here's a good time for me to campaign, because the naming convention that we use is not great. Underflood does not necessarily mean edge to edge, right? You saw that with the boom. It didn't print edge to edge, a rectangle of white. It's only printing where the artwork is that I chose. It's just white underneath color. We have overflood, which is white on top of color, which actually would be the boom graphic as a second surface. We have spot mode, which is white and color, or just white, but white and color not overlapping. And we also have sandwich mode, which is color, white, color. So that's going to be for a backlit application where it's illuminated from the front during the day, and then at night you would flip the switch and it would be backlit, because we know not just latex but solvent UV technology. The minute I have something that looks good when it's front lit, if I put the light on for behind, it washes out. So what we're doing is we're giving it an extra hit of color behind the white where it's invisible during the day. But at night, when it's backlit, now all of a sudden you get that boost of color so that it doesn't desaturate. Okay, so we have enable spot layer generation that I just turned on over here. And my spot channel is white. It's my only option. When presented with only one option, take it. I'll have to assume that Yogi Berra said that too. He said everything like that, right? And now I have options. And so I can choose the one I'm going to choose in this case is flood fill. And as I do this, you can see exactly what's happening. Flood fill is going to really edge to edge, just create a rectangle. This is rudimentary white creation that you can do in ONYX. I can't go in and say, I just want white behind her eyes as an example. That I'd have to do in Photoshop or Illustrator. But to just take an image like this and throw white onto it, I don't need to bring it in if all I want is a rectangle. Now there are other options, and I'm going to show you, really these two are just polar opposites of each other. So I'm going to show you what happens if I do fill image area. Fill image area is only going to put white ink where colored ink is laying down. Watch what happens when I choose this. Watch what happens here when it finally gets to here. Oh, it's not, because I cheated the system. Look at that. I do have ink there. Darn it.
I was going to say that file is ink, is 100% ink. Yep.
Yeah. I thought it would, because I put just a tint in there just to make sure that it would actually show. Ordinarily, if I had designed this as white, right, really white, not with any ink behind it at all, what would happen is I don't get white ink here, which may even be more important than having it on the rest of the file. Yeah, so of course I choose something that doesn't work just perfectly. It's just par for the course for me.
Yep.
But in general, I don't like to do this, just so you're aware, I don't like to do this with really at all. Because the other place that it can show up is anywhere that you have what's called a specular highlight. A specular highlight could just be a little glint in the eye or something like that, where there's no ink being laid down. And the moment you have no ink being laid down, now you have a pinhole in your white. And so I'm not a fan of doing fill image area, or non-image area would be everywhere that doesn't have ink applied, would lay down white ink. So I'm not crazy about that, but yeah, I was forward thinking enough when I created this file to make my whites not quite white, specifically so that that wouldn't happen. But yeah, ordinarily I'm going to choose flood fill, and then exactly the same thing. I'll just go ahead and hit submit the job, and now I have my files here. My UV woman image is still ready to. Still ripping, but I can see my file here, right? And what print modes I have and everything else ready to go. So this guy right here, this is a white overflood with 100% white ink density. And I should point out, we have 3 densities available. We have a 60% white, a 100% white, and a 160% white currently. And I will say, for a lot of applications, 60 is pretty darn good. It really depends on what you're doing and how much you need to hide behind that white ink. But I generally encourage people to try 60 first and see what they think. Yeah, so I've got my overflood right here. I have my spot mode, which is just my lion, and then she's done, my UV woman. Notice that because, and here's the other thing, notice that because I did not design my file with white, but added my white in ONYX, that thumbnail does not show me that there's white ink. Unlike, the obvious one here is boom, because I can see that there's color and that green applied to it. There is not that. At all. If I'm applying white, it is a little bit of a leap of faith. And here's what Bob was talking about earlier with the named colors. So the way I'm set up right now, to a Pantone 2925, with the generic applied, that delta E, it's saying we're going to get about 6.0 delta E. That's a generic, and oddly enough, for HP blue, it's sort of a difficult color to reproduce, but yeah. we can do better if we're using an actual media preset rather than just the generic. But that's what it would look like with a named color, other than white. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. Unlike these, you're not going to get an accurate preview that shows you that white has been applied. All right. So that is Illustrator, that is ONYX, and that is, wow, way more time than I anticipated taking. I'll blame it on my slow computer, not the fact that I like to talk. I guess at this point, I'll turn it over to any questions that people might have. Just
So yeah, I mean, so go ahead. If you have another question, please feel free to send it over at this moment in time. We'll be wrapping up in just a minute. I do want to let everybody know that we are, IT Supplies has everything for the perfect print. So just if you want, please call in, ask any of our knowledgeable sales staff, technical support specialists. We're here to answer your questions and really get you off to a good start so that you're off and printing and your business is successful. That's really what we care about. So if you don't know how to contact your sales rep, you can ask for a commercial sales specialist. The phone number here is 800-771-9665. Again, it's 800-771-9665. Okay, and so now I did see we got another question here.
Yeah, where in ONYX do I change the print mode to white? So that is, if I just pop open this file here, it's right here. It's under the mode name, and so I need to have a media that's already set up with white modes. But notice here that I have, in this case, I have 12 pass 6 color 120. 6 color is telling me that it's only 6 color, no white. But if I look at these that start with W, here I have white spot, white overflood, white underflood, and then white sandwich. So by choosing the mode, and I can do that here, which would force a re-rip, or I can go back into the job editor, it looks the same. That's where I'm actually choosing my white mode, right? So spot, overflood, underflood, and sandwich mode.
And then let's just briefly mention, so HP started off with just 3 densities for white, which was 100, 160, and 260. But guess what? This white is so opaque that they also realized they needed to add one for Windows. So they added the 60. So you may not see all those modes here. You may have to create them on your HP printer and then sync them here so that you have those modes. But the important thing is that you have those different choices. The higher in density on white, it will slow down the printer a little bit. So and most people that I know run at 100, but I do know 160. And if you're really desperate, you can run 260, but I don't know of anyone right now that, and Lee, you see this all the time, that uses 260. It's very slow, but it's, it's not often needed.
Yeah, the only application that I've seen that really needs 260 is I did have a customer, now this is on the R series, but functionally it's the same, who was printing on acrylic and then second surface printing on acrylic, and then it was wall decor, but it was going on a patterned wallpaper, and it was really stark. I mean, it was like black and white stripes almost, the wallpaper, and there was just a little bit of shadow between the black and white with anything other than 260. That's about the only application that really I think has needed 260. Okay, so we have further comment about that print mode to white. If it doesn't pop up for you, it's because that media doesn't have that mode available. Not every mode is available for every media, but if you go to self-adhesive vinyl media group and then generic cast self-adhesive vinyl, you should have all of the modes that you see here. If I choose generic self-adhesive vinyl, note I don't have those modes. So at least on my instance, when last I synced my RIP, those were only the cast self-adhesive vinyl actually had it. You can add those modes at the printer and then resync your RIP, but if it's not already there, it's because you're choosing a media that doesn't have that mode yet.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, Steve, if and this goes for anyone, if you do have questions about these types of things, just call in again, 800-771-9665. I'd be happy to answer. My name's Bob Miller, and I can walk you through how to go about doing that. So, and if you contact your commercial sales specialist, they may know, but certainly I'm always available to help out with these kind of things. So again, I just want to thank everyone. I know we've gone a little longer than we intended, but I think we had a lot of great information here. Lee, this was amazing. You've done a fantastic job once again. Always enjoy having you. Always enjoy having you. And so this really concludes our webinar right now. And I certainly want to encourage everybody to go and test out these modes. And if you have questions, or if you have a different printer from HP with white ink, and perhaps you want to discuss HP, feel free to call us. It's not a sales pitch. Well, it was, but but just saying. And and we have other manufacturers too. We can talk about whatever you need. But again, the whole goal here is to pick the best equipment, the best RIP, the best everything to get you to the perfect print, and that's what we're all about. So thank you for attending, and thank you, Lee. This has been great. Certainly we want to see you succeed, so please feel free to call us if you have any questions. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. All right, take care all.
Take care.